So this is the second in a series that we're doing on a subject called The Call for Life. And if you want to catch up on the other ones, the little red thing on the chair in front of you will show you how to get hold of those other ones from our website. And if you want to be on a mailing list, the little blue one on the chair in front of you, you can fill that in and be on our mailing list. So this series is called The Call of Life. Really, the question is, how is life calling us to respond to what happens to us? And last week we looked at those incredibly famous verses from Micah. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to take each of those. We did a sort of smorgasbord last week, and this week we're going to look at the whole area of the first one, to act justly. We talked last week about the importance of listening to our hearts, finding the wisdom that's in our hearts, and really it's out of that wisdom from our hearts that we should be responding to life. Heather mentioned this idea of the divine capacities, which I really liked, actually. And the divine capacities, I think, are that which characterizes us as being human, or at least spiritual beings trying to be human. And the divine capacities are things like peace and joy and love and charity and patience and kindness and goodness and generosity and gentleness and faithfulness and modesty and self-control. I think these are the capacities that define us as being human. They make us human rather than just being animal. I mean, animals, have emotions. To some degree, they have rationality. They even have shame. You can see when a dog is shamed. And they have these things. But as humans, we're able to self-reflect. And in our self-reflection, we have arrived at the understanding that there is a life force within us. A spark that not only gives us life, but which we can identify with, which we can grow in awareness of, and therefore take on some of its attributes. This is what we call the practice of spirituality. The cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. That's spirituality, the cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. And this produces the divine capacities. Our spirituality produces the capacity to be joy, to be love, to experience all those different things. Although they do occur naturally within us, the development of our spirituality, that relationship with the divine spark that is within us, immeasurably increases our ability to develop these capacities. And without them, we are just subject to our animal urges. And those wonderful verses from the Radiant Sutras, without that, it is always the same. Barbarians and blockheads, rival kings and queens, the drama rolls on. When people honor you, you're supposed to feel honored. When you don't get respect, you're expected to feel indignation. 1 minute you're cruising through the throne in the sky, the next you're standing on some bleak patch of dirt. I say the sun regards all with a steady eye. The force sustaining earth and sky calls everyone to awaken from this trance. This is the starting point for the development of the divine capacities. And without the divine capacities, I think it's impossible to do what we're asked here. To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. It's the divine capacities that gives us the ability to do that. Without these capacities, our actions are just calculations of the mind. We perform these requirements because they sound like the right thing to do, rather than being moved by the heart nature that's within us. It's possible to do all this stuff because our mind says, yeah, you should really be compassionate here. Go on, be compassionate. Rather than being moved to be compassionate. If we are not moved by the heart nature, then when circumstances change, we're liable to lash out. When suddenly things go completely wrong, if we're not in our heart nature, we're going to lash out. We abandon then our high moral principles for what's expedient. In contrast to that, look at Gandhi's reaction to the trouble and unrest in India around partition. He didn't lash out. He said he would fast until death unless they stopped. That is a response of the heart. That is how the heart responds. So when we look at the idea of acting justly, we're not looking at it from a legalistic sense of just balance. We're looking at it as the only loving response to a situation. That's what we're that's what we're looking at justice as being, the loving response to a situation. We look at the Hebrew words for act justly. They are mispat asawat. The Hebrew words are mispat asawat. Mispat denotes judgment, and asawat is to make. So if you look at the original Hebrew, the words that we know as act justly means to make judgment. It's about making judgment. We're talking here about one of the key things we're required to do, and that is exercising right judgment. And exercising right judgment is what produces justice. Right judgment produces justice. And in Old English, justice means the administration of the law. That's where the word comes from, the administration of the law. But that, of course, begs the question, which law? And, of course, the real answer is not some law that some blokes made up 100, 200, 300 years ago, but it's divine law. Right judgment comes out of divine law rather than man's law. The law that says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the standard. And of course, when most of us go looking for justice, we want man's law. That's what we want. We want our pound of flesh. And it's a different standard. And of course it would be. Divine law is the standard. Divine law is the standard that turns the other cheek, that goes the extra mile, that gives the cloak off your back, that loves your enemies, that loves those that persecute you. It's the hard stuff. When you read the Bible, you get the stuff that everyone says, oh yeah, that's okay. But, when you get to the bit where love your enemies, that's the stuff when, when preachers say, oh yeah, well, that doesn't really mean this. It doesn't really mean, yeah, it's quite okay to go to war. That's no problem. That's the hard stuff. It's really, but it's not okay. You get explanations as to why the hard stuff cannot be done in a modern society. The truth is, they cannot be done because they're held to a different standard of law, because it's based on a different reality. And the reality that it's based on is the reality that we are all one and that we are all interdependent. That is the reality that it's based upon, that it is the reality of the unity of consciousness, the reality of that we are all of a one, and the reality that we are all interdependent. And that law, out of that comes the divine capacities that are within us all. We have to have that sense of peace and love and joy and goodness within us before we can even approach this level of law. We have to have those within us. You can't do it from the mind. You have to have it within you. It is the wisdom of Solomon. You remember that judgment between the two women, both of whom claimed the baby. Solomon said, let the child be cut in half, and each mother can be given half of the child. And the real mother says, let her keep the baby. And Solomon was able to instantly recognize the true mother. We are sadly lacking in this wisdom and judgment in our world today. The justice that we have is not one based on this wisdom, but one that is based on the expediency of civil society. It's based on the expediency of civil society. And that's okay. The law based on the expedience of civil society is better than having no justice at all. It's okay. And yet it is far from the justice that we're called to bring about through a judgment that's based on the understanding of the way that the divine works. And so really, when we're looking at this, we're back to the nature of reality. Unless you understand the nature of reality, of our place within the divine realm, of our being interconnected with all things, an expression of the divine, unless you understand that, where our enemy, that famous thing from the Tao Te Ching, that your enemy is the shadow that you yourself cast. You can just see that everywhere. Your enemy is the shadow that you yourself cast. Unless you can get that, you cannot exercise right judgment. We can only be another barbarian and blockhead, another rival king or queen, making the drama roll on. And we are called to stop the drama and know that the sun regards all with a steady eye. The force sustaining earth and sky calls everyone to awaken from this trance. Rich beyond measure, abundant beyond counting, you can move through life laughing. And to do that, we must be responding from our hearts and not just from our bodies or our minds.
Thank you, Chris. So to quote that line from Micah again, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Interestingly, as I sat with that line this week, particularly the words to act justly, my mind didn't automatically go towards the nature of justice, but to what might lie beneath acting justly. It seems to me that first and foremost it's a question of clear thinking, similar to Nicholas's emphasis on clear judgment. The importance of being able to perceive from wholeness rather than from partiality. It seems to me that so many of our problems on all levels of our human experience come down to the fact that we all see and read reality from our own limited perspective. Perspective that's inevitably based on our own experience and conditioning. Of course, the way that we see and perceive will be in large part determined by the way that we were programmed to see and perceive, by our habituated patterns, by what we want to see or what we fear seeing. So, and we touched a bit on this last week in terms of how we might listen to the heart and live from the heart. How listening to and engaging with the deeper intelligences of our minds and bodies aid us in listening to our deeper heart. How an attuned heart is able to read and intuit patterns of reality, finding meaning and clarity in the midst of what might be otherwise perceived as disorder and chaos. So bringing together the intelligence of our minds, our bodies, and our hearts enable us to at least begin to perceive things from wholeness rather than from partiality. It's to the extent that we can perceive reality accurately and from a deeper consciousness that then the ability to act justly will then arise. And I love that line in the Radiance Sutra The sun regards all with a steady eye. It reminds me of that bit from the Beatitudes where Jesus says he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. I remember when I was 10-ish being completely discombobulated by that line. I couldn't figure it out with my 10-year-old intellect. And sometimes it's like I can so remember it, a sense of, I could intuit something in that was true, but I couldn't figure it out. And like it takes our life to even begin to get to what it's all about. But this is amazing to me. This is wisdom, Sophia, that which runs through all these spiritual traditions. It's reality, it's truth. The sun regards all with a steady eye. And as I reflect on that line, it makes me realize that we all, to a greater or lesser extent, in our unenlightened states, behold reality with some level of delusion and distortion, and that it's from a deeper consciousness, a pure, crystal clear, exquisitely beautiful kind of being and seeing that we're invited to live from. Often we talk about our mind. When we talk about our mind, we automatically think of, our monkey mind, the endless chatter, and of how it's usually on autopilot. And of course, that can be pretty unattractive and ungenerative. But what we're talking about here is a mind that's imbued and illuminated with presence, capital P, that's qualitatively different to what we often associate with the mind. You could say then that the call of our entire lives is to cultivate a beautiful mind, a beautiful, generative, and clear thinking, that along with an attuned heart and an alive body allows us to start to read reality more accurately and more honestly, more objectively. I'm sure we've all had experiences of a certain kind of clear and spacious, awe-filled kind of clarity of thinking, a kind of thinking that feels unpolluted, precise, quiet, lacking in drama. Not sleepy or daydreamy, but incisive and expansive. This is the mind that does not judge or discriminate or exclude. So it seems to me that to be fully human would be to somehow live out of this place of inner perfect seeing, even as we have our feet firmly planted on this earth in the muck and mire of our lives. So the question is, how can we each bring this deeper consciousness, this deeper beauty to the world where strife and discord, hatred and revenge can so easily take the upper hand? That discriminating mind can be so subtly and insidiously divisive, and it can drive our actions and our beliefs. Nicholas spoke over the summer at length on levels of consciousness, and I think now of how easy it is to live out of that kind of racial consciousness that he spoke of, that consciousness that divides and categorizes and condemns and excludes. The thing is, if we're honest, we all live this way, and we cannot afford to anymore. It is not good enough to join in with the circus of craziness that fills our TV screens and the daily chatter on news channels. There's a deeper consciousness and reality that we're asked to live out of, and that all spiritual traditions at their deepest level point to. A way of being in the world that sees from a deeper, clearer beauty, cohesion, and coherence. We're asked to live with a foot in both the world of duality, of form in our physical bodies in this world, and with a foot in the world of non-duality and to this otherworldly wisdom, which we might call the kingdom of heaven, and to bring the two together, to bring that kind of consciousness forth in and through our lives, in our families, in our communities and countries, Seeing from this deeper, more perfect, true reality doesn't negate the fact that bad things are happening. Far from it. It acknowledges that and brings a different quality of being to bear. So back to that sutra, I think it's so brilliant. It's a massive wake-up call. Yes, it's lofty and aspirational, but it's not only lofty and aspirational. Like the Beatitudes, it's a statement of fact. The Beatitudes aren't stated just to tease us or trick us. Jesus stated them as a call to action, to a deeper form of living and loving. And so, of course, as we look out over this mightily upset world we live in, it's beholden to us to look into our own hearts, our own lives, and just to notice and to inquire. Ask yourself, where might you be seeing something, judging something from a partial and limited perspective? Where in your life do you have an axe to grind? And might that axe to grind actually be an indication that there's something in your own self, in my own self, that needs addressing or transforming? The truth is, it always starts with us. Where do you feel blame? Rather than focus on someone else being wrong, to look at ourselves and to ask for that humility to see where we might be off. To have the humility to face the reality that we all see partially. None of us own the truth. None of us see from wholeness. Even as we may wish to, even as that may be the deepest desire of our hearts. So this is our call, individually and collectively. A different consciousness, a different way of perceiving, a different kind of showing up is what's called for. That is what we're here for. I mean, that is what we're here for as the chapel and everything. So on that, I think, are we going into a time to talk about this, if anyone wants to join in with this conversation?
We are, yes. So we always like to give everyone an opportunity to come in and say anything they'd like about what we've been talking about. Silence is okay as well, so we're okay to sit with silence for a while if we want to do that. But does anyone have anything they'd like to add or question or be with from what we've been talking about? Yes, Barbara, thank you.
Thank you. This is amazing. The one thing that occurred to me is that a lot of times judgments are based on past experiences, and their memories or collective memories, a group memory, or history. Some of them are positive and some of them are negative. And I think to make judgments that are right, or right judgment, we need to also remember those things rightly. And it takes, I think, the ability to be able to uncouple the emotion and the pain and the fear that we feel from those memories in order to look without that emotion at the new situation and hopefully make a decision that goes forward in a more positive way.
Mm. I think that's absolutely right. My mother died this week. It's her birthday today. And I always said of my mother, I can say this now because I know she's not watching, she never had a forgiving bone in her body. and it was just it's a sweet thing that she had. But she looked at life from, as you're saying, from those hurts and from that perspective. And I think forgiveness in ourselves is something that is, I hadn't mentioned that during my talk or Heather's talk, but I think forgiveness is quite an important thing, forgiving of ourselves and the forgiving of those around us in order to be able to make those right judgments. I think that's a fantastic thing to say. Letting go of it, thank you.
If you can let go of the emotional piece, it makes it so much easier to deal with the problem at hand, if it is a problem or whatever the situation is.
That's lovely, thank you. Yes, I'm going to come to birthday boy.
That quote was just amazing. It literally blew my mind when Justin read it. But it reminded me of a quote I saw the other day that passion can push us, but purpose will pull us. And pulling seems a lot more powerful. And it reminds me of that Audi ad. It's better to pull a car than to push it. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. I missed the Audi ad. I must give no, I was in it. We didn't have that. I think Audi in England was Vorsprung durch Technik, I think it was. That was their strapline there. Yes, Mark, thank you.
Forgiveness is to give first.
Oh, forgiveness is to give first. That's great. Thank you, Mark. That's great. Yes, I'm going to come to Mimi now.
If anyone wants to come to yoga, meditation, this is what we do. So we use our breath, we use our body, and we clear our minds to connect to that space that is divine, that is compassionate, to embody that and to live from it. So that's what we try to do in my yoga class. So if anyone wants to come, they are more than welcome.
Thank you, Mimi.
That's so great. And that's Tuesdays at 5:30 in here, right? Thanks.
Good. Anybody else like to? Donna.
Well, I want to thank you all for today, Nicholas, Heather, and Bev, or Chris. But I want to thank you, Barbara, for that word, that verb, uncouple, because I think that's really important to remember that when we're trying, it's necessary if we're going to be present. We can't be present if we're still holding on to our attachments, to negative attachments to past situations. So I'm really grateful for that. And your notion about the sun reminds me, and I won't have it correct, of a Rumi quote, a Rumi poem about the sun. There's no greater love than the sun has for all the elements that it supports. Anyway, thank you.
I just think it's so interesting how all these traditions say the same thing.
Funny that, isn't it?
Isn't
Yeah.
it just, of course, I mean, it's obvious, isn't it, really?
Yes. Frederick.
In Mel Gibson's movie, The Passion of Christ, there's a scene there that just sticks with me. Jesus stumbling under the weight of carrying his own cross up to Golgotha. He looked up at his mother and he said, "Behold, I make all things new." And I experienced that newness breaking into our midst this morning.
That's lovely. Thank you, Frederick. That's lovely.
I have one thing to add, actually,
Yeah, go on,
funnily enough.
add.
I just think it fits with what you just said there. When I was going over what I was going to say this morning, just the beauty of the mind, the beauty of clear thinking versus the chaos of the world, just made me think of, this is Psalm 46, I think. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. There was that line, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. It's like there's something so beautiful that's so much massiver and containing this whole crazy world.
Good. I think we'll quit while we're ahead with that.